Hey guys, Jim Vanosky with Manufacturing Talks here. Welcome back. Got a different kind of show for you today. So, if you're in manufacturing and you're thinking, geez, I want to expand my market and maybe I ought to look international. Well, one place you ought to be looking is India. And we've got a guest today. His name is Frank Seidel. He's with Wamser Batra. They are a company that helps manufacturers in America look at India as a potential new market. And so he's full of info on how to do that, what to look at, how to get started, how to get over there, and how to establish your business. So if that's something you're interested in, Frank is joining us in just a minute here on Manufacturing Talks. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hi, Jim Vanosky with Manufacturing Talks. Welcome to our show. Really glad today to be joined by Frank Seidel. He is the managing director of Wamser Batra USA. Welcome, Frank.
Hello, Jim. How are you today? Thanks for
I'm
having me
good.
on
How
the
are
show.
you doing?
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad you could join us today. You've got some very interesting stuff to talk about. I know a lot of folks in my audience will be interested in hearing all you have to say about the market in India. But before we go down that road, why don't you just give us a little background on yourself and how you landed where you are?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. Originally, I'm from Germany, as you might tell by the accent. I have lived and worked in 4 different countries on 2 different continents, including France, the UK, and now, of course, the US. Have done an extended stint in working in India, which, of course, flows very nicely into the discussion today. But
Right.
during my previous life, as consultant, communication was always the main issue in allowing companies to get the results that they wanted. And as we're going to talk about India, we're going to see that communication is really the main issue when trying to do business over there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, what about Wamser Batra? I'm sure most folks out there aren't really familiar with the company.
Right. The company is located in Germany. The 2 founders have been engaged in doing business with India for over 20 years. They are a team. One is actually from India and the other one is German. And we have a fairly large team in Germany that is comprised of expats that have done business all around the world. And so they have walked the walk and talk the talk. They've walked in the shoes of companies who want to do business over there. And then we have also a very large implementation team in India, which is really our strength, that we have people on the ground over there in India, and we can jump in at any given time.
Got it. Yep. And so the fact that you're here in the U.S. says the company has now established a presence here. I assume that you see a lot of opportunity for companies here to tap into the Indian market.
Correct. The reasoning is because I'm German and I've worked with India for such a long time, and I've lived here for over 25 years. I would be the best person to actually open up this market and help American companies to either deal with their existing operations or help them to enter the market.
Okay, interesting. So I've actually done some reading on the topic, and I, from my reading, know that there's a lot of advantages to looking at India. But I think, a lot of people out there, as they think about large offshore markets, the first thing that comes to mind is China. So why do you think folks ought to look to India versus China?
It is probably not exclusive from each other. They can coexist. Yep. But just to give you 2 main differences between the 2 markets is India is the largest democracy in the world with 1.4 billion people. So that's a compelling reason. And that leads into the second one, is that it has become hazardous to do business in China. It is dangerous for an executive to go over there. I think the chances of not coming back are increasing
Wow.
which is not something that I would like to do if I went over there. Of course, there's a language barrier. Chinese is a lot more difficult to learn than speaking Indian English. India is really incentivized to bring new investments in. I'm going to point out just one specific investment that might be interesting to U.S. companies. But overall, the business environment in India is probably a lot more friendly towards the Western ways than China was. And finally, you may have seen this in the Wall Street Journal, where they made the comparison between the workforce in China today and India's workforce. And India is today where China was about 30 years ago. But they don't have a one-child policy in India.
Right.
And therefore, the long-term prospects of having a workforce that keeps building on its current strength is probably quite high.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I just read an article yesterday by actually another guest who joined us last summer, Samuel Gregg, who was writing about some of the difficulties in China, and that was one thing he spelled out. I don't think a lot of people in the U.S. are aware of the demographic problem that the one-child policy has fostered in China. So important to get familiar with that kind of stuff. And then there's all the structural things you hear about with the property investment problem and the resulting banking problems. How does India stack up around the soundness of the economy?
The economy is growing at a very fast clip. Right now, it's projected to keep growing at 6%. The last quarter, the last numbers that I read were actually more above 8, closer to 9%. Their GDP is somewhere around about $3.6 billion. And it's the fourth largest industry, but it continues to grow as also the income demographics are shifting. And so by 2030, there's a projection that shows that 70 million households will be lifted out of poverty into what is considered the middle standard, so the middle class of India, which it's still not comparable to U.S. standards or Western standards when you then calculate the per capita buying power.
Yep.
But it is, with 1.4 billion people, it is still a very large population. You just have to have the right product to fit into that market.
Right. And directionally, then it speaks volumes of potential future opportunity as well.
Correct. Yes.
Interesting. So if there's a company over here that's been entirely domestic and they're thinking, yeah, I want to tap into a potentially lucrative offshore market, and they think, okay, yeah, Frank's right, India looks good. What are some of the top few considerations that manufacturers here should be keeping in mind as they start looking at potentially expanding in that direction?
Due diligence is very important in all respects, whether it is the location, the product that you want to sell over there. Are there actually enough companies that want to buy your product? Whether you sell B2B or B2C, it does not matter. You really have to do your homework. While there are plenty of incentives for going to India, there are also many pitfalls, and it's really important to do your homework before going over there. So, and there are successive steps that can be done in order to really make sure that investing the time and resource of going to India is worth your while. And bring a lot of patience. It will take time.
Yep.
Yeah. And I do want to caution anybody who wants to go over there of doing your own research. Don't underestimate or overestimate the quality of the data that you can find or the validity of the data. It's very difficult to find very reliable data in India. And you really have to know how to cross-check the databases and your sources in order to make sure that what you see is really what is fact and true.
So that's interesting. I think most people have a sense that you can't necessarily trust what you get out of China, but I don't know that I've ever heard that particular concern when people have talked about India. what is the basis for that? I don't think they intentionally mislead, as
Right.
possible adversaries do. So
No.
why would that be?
Uh, Data comes from so many different sources and it's not verified. It just ends up in a pool. Um, or the data was never really was never properly researched, um, or it was fudged. And also the number system between the US and India is slightly different, especially when it comes to money. They count in different ways. Um, so it will take time to get used to that too. But
Yeah.
even factual data, it has to be cross-checked. To give you an example, if you put out a job description or a job opening and you're looking for a CEO, for example, it is very likely that you're going to find a significant portion of that where emails have been repurposed or they have been falsified or their background doesn't check out and so forth. So it is really important that you work with a company that knows how to verify all this data and can provide you with reliable information.
Right. Yep. Well, and obviously, India is a good friend to the U.S. That being said, it is a very different culture as well, right?
Mhm. Yes, in terms of culture, there are many peculiarities, but I have come to really like them because once you immerse yourself in the culture, and I would recommend that any executive of a company who is considering doing business in India should absolutely go to India,
Right. Yep.
either with a guide or even by yourself, just to see what it's like. From being in the country will give you such a different perspective, because it's very important when you do business over there to look through the lens of India and how to solve the problems, because the way people communicate in India is very different. For example, a hierarchy has a very different status
Mhm.
compared to Western countries. The way you praise or you tell an employee how they're supposed to do things differently, it's very different there than it is here.
Interesting. Yep. And that kind of leads to my next question. Uh, I assume with your experience over there and with people here that you've seen some kind of common mistakes that people have been making in going over there. What are the top two or three of those?
Talking about culture, right, and communication in particular,
Hmm.
Indians communicate in a very contextual way. They use more. You have to read between the lines.
Hmm.
You have to try to understand the subtle cues. For example, in Indian culture, you will very rarely hear a no. It is more likely that they will try to circumvent answering the question or dealing with the topic altogether.
Right. Yep.
So you will not meet resistance per se, but you will still not get there because they're trying to evade you. Yeah. Hierarchy in the office. The reason why it is important is they actually appreciate what we would call micromanagement.
Mm.
So we are used to a very egalitarian system where we actually encourage someone to speak up and try to poke holes, whereas in India it's the exact opposite. If you speak up, then you're not respecting the hierarchy and the superiority of somebody who is older or has more experience than you, and so forth. And therefore, if a manager does not kind of micromanage their subordinates, they think they're not valued. So those are some of the things, and
Yep.
also it's. I go back to what I said before. You have to do your due diligence. So if you find a business partner, because that's what everybody gravitates to when trying to do business in India,
Yep.
when you find a business partner, you really have to check the background and make sure that there's a good fit in all aspects, especially on the financial side. And so take your time, make sure that you know who you're dealing with.
Do you find there are differences among different potential partners over there from that end as far as them understanding the U.S. culture, people over here?
That's a very good point. We try so much to adjust our ways to match theirs, but you won't find the same in return. So
Interesting.
once you start working with somebody, whether you have, let's say you have hired a CEO and you found that there's a really good match because you've had a company that helped you to do that.
Mhm.
We really encourage our clients to then bring that CEO over and have them experience what it is like to work at the headquarters. So experience the US and show them what they expect or what is expected of them, so that they can go over to India and they can implement that. It is not. It's not impossible to impart these standards that we have over here to being implemented over there. It just takes a little bit more effort to do that.
Yep, for sure. Is there a difference as far as level, not sure how to put this, level of insularity between the U.S. and India? Are we more, I don't know, more in an outreach mode, in a connective mode than them, or vice versa? Are they more focused on making those connections?
They certainly want foreign investments,
Yep.
and they make a lot of money available to attract that.
Okay.
I always say that India is like the Switzerland of Asia. They don't like to make enemies with anybody, right? They do business with everybody.
Yep.
And so they have created this trade corridor with the Middle East, Europe, and then last year after the G7 meeting in Mumbai, the US joined as well.
Right.
And I think it's very important to be part of that for the US. And it opens really the path to doing bilateral business deals and business cooperation. I think that India is reaching out to foreign countries as much as foreign countries want to get in there. It will all take some time for India to get up to the level of the Western countries. But I think the companies that are pioneering and that are getting in early, they might get a leg up, certainly over the next 3 to 4 decades, in my opinion.
What about vice versa? Are Indian companies also reaching out and making inroads into, say, like the American market?
Absolutely. Yes. There are many private investment firms that are actually investing in Indian companies to come over here to the US. That's one thing that I saw. And also I've seen a couple of initiatives from states. So state-driven initiatives to bring Indian companies here to the US.
Yep. Good deal.
So it really goes both ways. And for US companies, there are also many different ways to take advantage of the Indian market. You can produce over there and sell over there. You can produce over there and export and bring it back here into the US, right? Or you can produce in India and export from there into other countries, just like the Middle East and Europe, and take advantage of those existing trade relationships. Mm-hmm. So there are many different ways of taking advantage of the current situation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. That there are several different potential modes of business that people can get into when they partner over there. That being said, obviously, you guys are in the thick of things when it comes to arranging those kinds of partnerships, and I have to imagine, trying to go it alone would be pretty difficult, especially for smaller companies. So let's talk about Wamser Batra, and what is it that you guys offer? What do you bring to the table for companies considering a move like this?
When a company goes over to India or tries to do business over there, we've talked about the cultural problems. We've touched a little bit about the environmental issues. I mean, with that infrastructure, for example, how to deal with the infrastructure, knowing which state is the best state to start your business or to build your manufacturing plant, for example.
Right.
How to find the right partner and so forth. All of these things need to be considered. Those are a lot of moving parts going over there. And you will find there's no shortage of companies that will try to help you with any of those pieces. There are probably only very few companies that can help you with everything. And then amongst those, you really need to check out and who has a track record with doing all of these things and helping you to create a long-term strategy. India really is a long-term play. You can't go over there and expect, profits within 3 to 5 years, maybe even. It depends, right? It is a long-term play. And so we are fortunate enough that we have our expert staff is comprised of expatriates who have done business in India, some of them for multiple decades. So they have walked the walk, they have talked the talk. They've really gone through all the problems that a company doing business in India will experience. And we have the solutions as well. We have the best practices. We have the procedures to take care that you can avoid the tripwires, and you don't get yourself into trouble, because once you've established a company and you haven't done it with a long-term thought, it is very, very difficult to change that. It might be better just to start over again.
Oh, wow. Yep. Interesting. Another thing I found interesting is I don't think a lot of people in the U.S. even really give much thought to that notion of there being different states with different advantages and disadvantages over in India.
It goes even further than that. Modi is encouraging all the states to compete against each other.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense, but makes it that much more difficult, right?
Correct, yes. And when you look at the landscape, so India is about a third of the size of the U.S., considering that they are home to 1.4 billion people. That tells you something about the population density in certain areas, right?
Yep.
But the main areas are really the north, south, east, and west. In the center, there is not that much going on yet. And the interesting thing is that people from the north may not be able to talk or understand even the people from the south, and the same east, west, and so forth. So there are about 1,000 languages, of which there are probably a few dozen that are truly relevant and spoken by many people. Then there are hundreds of religions. Then there are all these cultural regions. And all of that needs to be considered when doing business over there. It is far more important there than it is here, I would think.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider when going over there or being over there already.
Yeah, I think most people, like I am, would be shocked to hear there are 1,000 languages, for example. That's something that I think is so far beyond our experience that it's nothing that would ever occur to us without someone like you to help us understand the lay of the land there.
We're certainly blessed with a very, very strong team in India. So we have 6 offices in India to cover a wide area, and we have specialists to cover pretty much the majority or the important languages. And of course, we have experts in the regional areas and so forth. This is why we have different offices. And so we try our best to help with that. But the important part to bridge the gap between the different cultures is really that you can be in both places at the same time. So that for me, for example, I would be the universal translator between the US business requirements and then how to get things done in India. And of course, my team in India, that's the extension. of me, right? They will get things done, but I have to be able to communicate it to them. And so this is where it all comes together. Um, I think we're a successful team in getting that done. My business partners in Germany have been doing it for over 20 years for 750 companies, and so we bring a little bit of experience to the table.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I have to imagine that experience is just enormous when you just look at the nuts and bolts of getting things done, like you said, whether it's labor supply and the skills you need or the supplies coming in that you need to make whatever you're making. Those, I would have to think if you tried to fly solo would be each one a daunting task
Yes,
to take on.
especially for trying to do that from the US.
Mhm.
You really need to make use of agents who can be there on the ground, because everything in India is relationship based.
Mhm.
This is why it's so important to find the right partners and take time to create real partnerships.
Yep.
And this is something that's a little counterintuitive to, for example, Americans. When we want to do business, we get down to business, right? Even though we enjoy hanging out, but first we want to do
Yep.
business. Well, in India, it's the other way around. First, they want to understand who you are, because it's a long-term game.
Uh-huh.
To give you an example, an airline located in Delhi, they were hoping to get more slots for their airplanes to land and take off from the Delhi airport. So the managing director of that airline started to court is maybe the wrong word, because he wanted to create a long-term relationship, but he started to establish a relationship with the Minister of Transportation in Delhi. And for about a year and a half, they were just, getting together, having tea and discussing how things are and so forth. And over the year and a half, then the minister was asking, so what can I do for you? And the managing director is like, I'm just happy to have a relationship with you.
Mm.
And it took another half year before the minister said, would you benefit from some additional slots at our airport so that your planes could come in and out? And so it took 2 years basically from start
Yeah.
to finish. It
And
was, yeah. And
I
so
was going to say, I have to imagine, going in there the way we would and just laying it right out from the get-go
yeah,
probably wouldn't have gone all that well.
right. Yes. And so you have to understand how to thread the needle and then how to play the game. And that's why it's good to have a partner who's been doing this for a while.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, so we've talked about India. Does Wamser Batra work with other countries as well, or are you specifically focused on India?
We focus on India. That's our expertise, and we stick to that. Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, we talked, obviously, there's enormous potential growth over there. Is that kind of your future as you're looking to capitalize on what you see as that promising future for India
Absolutely.
and the people doing business with them?
Oh, absolutely. Our goal is, just like you have to do it in India, build long-term relationships. My goal with every US company that wants to work with us, I hope to establish a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Because it is good to have friends in that business in India, right?
Yep.
And as our network extends and our reach into all the different areas and industries, we can then use that to help our clients to be more successful and grow and flourish over there.
Yeah. And, I'm sitting here thinking personally, there's a huge plus I'm hearing to that relationship building. And that is, I think, my own personal view, we've become far too transactional in the US, where it's just, yeah, either you're doing something for me or you're gone. And I think it's hurt us as businesses, and it's hurt us as a culture.
Right. I remember when I was still working in Germany, and one of the managers or one of my clients was mad at me. I said, Johannes, let's go and have a beer. And so we went to the bar and we had some beers and we wrote out on a napkin, these are the things that we need to change.
Yeah.
And from then onwards, it was smooth sailing, and we got a lot accomplished. And it's this type of relationship that should be possible, even in a transaction-based society or environment. I'd much rather my client comes to me and tells me, Frank, this is wrong. You need to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you have time? Let's go and have a beer. Let's, let's hammer this out. Let's figure out how we can be successful together.
I like it. Any last thoughts before we wrap up on what Wamser Batra has going on, or what folks ought to be looking at over in India?
I'm just happy that we could talk about this. There are tremendous opportunities. If I may just touch on one, and this is just as an example.
Yep.
India, for example, has a bucket of money for sustainable technologies and projects to the tune of $530 billion.
Oh, geez. Yeah, it's a big bucket.
That's just one of the buckets. And that's just for sustainability, right?
Yep.
Imagine the bucket that they have available for infrastructure, for defense, for biotech, for IT projects and so forth. I mean, there is a lot of money over there. It's not all up for grabs because some of it is managed by the state, but then there are some industries that are wide open. Telecom, for example. Telecom allows 100% of foreign investments to be used, and there is plenty of growth over there for telecom projects, for example.
Well, superb. I think, personally, based on what I have learned, that India is, a future big power. And so, getting in with them for a long-term relationship, I think, is the right direction. Frank, thank you for bringing your expertise to help us understand that more.
Thank you, Jim, for having me. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope your listeners have taken something away. And if there's anything we can do for them, please feel free to contact me directly. Yeah,
and I can certainly plug your information into the show description. So thanks again, Frank. And of course, thanks to all of you. I hope this was as educational for you as it was for me. I had no idea the richness of the opportunities or the richness of the culture over there. So definitely wonderful learning all about that. And I look forward to hearing more about what you guys have going on. So certainly folks out there, if you found this valuable, we're here every Tuesday, sometimes more. I can't promise every show is going to be as educational as what Frank brought us today, but they're all going to be at least a little educational. So thanks, and join us next time. So long.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Banoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.